I'm now joined by Grant Cohn. He is the 49ers beat writer for Sports Illustrated, all 49ers. He's going to be turning the tables on me, and we're going to be talking all about Brandon Aiyuk. I got to see him firsthand at ASU, so I know the ins and outs of the Aiyuk that we now call him. So, Grant, I'm going to toss it to you, and yeah, we'll get going.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, you brought me on your show to ask me what I know about Brandon Aiyuk. Well, now we've had 4 days of training camp, and he's one of the early stars. He's just been fantastic. And you know Brandon Aiyuk much better than I do. You've covered him face-to-face. I still haven't. I've only covered him via Zoom, and that's much more impersonal. So I'd like to ask an expert just a few questions about him. What does he do? What are his special qualities as a football player?
Well, I think first off the bat is the fact that you guys are seeing him kind of shine the last few days. He doesn't mind being under the radar. So you guys are seeing that now, but at ASU, he had a year under N'Keal Harry, and he was under the radar, and he never let that get to him. But once he stepped on the field 2019 and he was a star, instantly you knew he was going to be a premier wide receiver. He was going to be prominent. But he has great hands, great feet, great route running, long arms, and especially, and that was something that we didn't really realize or talk about when he was at ASU, but how long his arms are. And that's something Kyle Shanahan's going to love, because he loves when those guys can go up and get the ball. And that's something that he can do. His quickness, he is so quick. His burst, if he gets space, he's out of there. You will not catch him. He didn't run the fastest 40. He was 4.5. But it reminded me of someone else who ran a 4.6, but was never caught from behind, and that was Jerry Rice. And so I really think that even though his 40 wasn't that fast, it doesn't represent how fast he really is on the field. And the last thing is underrated, his physicality. He's not afraid to run through defenders, run through the center of the field. He broke 13 tackles last season at ASU. And he never dropped a deep ball in his whole career at ASU. So, again, the great hands coming into play, great feet all around. He just really does it all really well.
That's a fantastic breakdown. It sounds like what you're telling me is that he's got it all.
He does have it all. And the thing that I really think Kyle Shanahan is going to love with him is that he can, no matter where he puts him on the field, defenses are never going to know what's coming, because he can be used in so many different outlets.
Interesting. You mentioned that he was under the radar, that he didn't even start until his final season because he was backing up N'Keal Harry, another first-round pick. When did Brandon Aiyuk first appear on your radar? What was it during a practice, a game, and what was it about him that said, "Oh, okay, this guy's special"?
For me personally, it was the third Pac-12 conference game against Washington State. And he had one of the best games in his ASU career. He had 3 touchdowns, but he also kept leaving the field to go to the locker room. And we were like, what's going on? And come to find out, he was battling the flu. But you never saw him on the sidelines hunched over or anything like that. 3 touchdowns, one of the best games of the season and of his career. But what's important, like I just mentioned, Kyle Shanahan can use him all over the field. And just like Herm did, these 3 touchdowns, one came from a deep ball, one was a simple slant, and one he was caught in space. So, again, 3 different ways. You didn't know if he was the dink and dunk or the deep ball. And it was just a fantastic game. So, for me personally, him fighting the flu, I call it his MJ game, and the 3 touchdowns, that grit and that perseverance for him, he was on my radar. He still did live up to the N'Keal Harry name, but for the most part, he was carrying that torch really well.
So interesting what you say about how he can do everything. He also can. There's other things he can do in the Niners offense too, like jet sweeps and end arounds and reverses, and he can also return punts and kicks. Isn't that right?
Yeah, he's really dominant. He's really impactful on special teams, and you just don't see it coming, again, under the radar. But there he is, special teams, and he's getting it done.
Absolutely. Well, wide receiver might be the most difficult position to transition from college to the pros. I mean, maybe even more difficult than quarterback these days. You often hear it takes a wide receiver 3 years to really blossom in the NFL. Knowing Aiyuk as well as you do, what would you say if there was one thing he needed to work on the most in the NFL to realize all of his massive potential? What do you think it is?
Definitely it's going to be learning the pro offense. I'm not too worried about him learning it. I just know that there's a learning curve for it. But with Brandon Aiyuk, he didn't have his full first season of playing receiver was at junior college. So when he was his first year at junior college, there was the first time he's ever played a full season of receiver, and he did it. And you think of it, that's not that long ago since he just left ASU last year. So he can do it. So we're hearing all the news over the weekend that Kyle Shanahan was saying he's ahead of other rookies. And that's really important with Brandon Aiyuk, is to get what the knowledge and the IQ in the classroom, and I say classroom, but that I mean off the field, him learning the plays, that's going to be the biggest challenge for him. And I don't even know if it's going to be that big of a challenge, because he's so smart and he wants to get this. Between 2018 and 2019, when he was leaving from out of under N'Keal Harry's shadow, he went and looked and watched every single one of his games from 2018 and tried to see what he could do better. And he said that there were some plays and some routes where he was supposed to take 5 steps. He took 4 or 3 or was out too close to the sideline. And when you have that much self-awareness where you're going to go back, watch yourself, and that's the guy that 49ers are getting. So I'm not worried about him on field. I'm not worried about his team chemistry or any of that. It's just going to be learning this offense and how does he fit into it. And again, finding his groove like he had to at ASU, because it took him a minute after he watched all that film to implement that into 2019 and kind of get into it. So really just learning the playbook and getting used to a pro-style offense in the NFL.
You bring up such a great point that I don't think a lot of Niner fans know. He's new to the position. In high school, he played cornerback. Yep. So he's a terrific athlete, and he's doing very well at training camp. But basically what he needs is experience. And that'll just come with time on task in games and practice. It'll be a process. But so far, he's way ahead of where I expected, given no minicamp, no OTAs. As you say, he's very bright and picks things up quickly. My last question for you is, since you've actually been around him in a locker room, face-to-face, and I don't know if I ever will be, what is he like? What's his personality like? And do you have a story about him?
I do. First, he is so down to earth and just genuine and hardworking. There's no ego. There's nothing with him that he brings on the field or off the field. Team player, even when he was flying under the radar with N'Keal, whatever he could get the job, if he could get the job done to win, that's all he wanted. And so he brings that, no chip on his shoulder, none of that. The two stories, one when he was under N'Keal Harry, about to take over in 2019, Twitter was coming at him. Everyone was coming at him. Media, how are you going to take this? How are you going to take the torch? And he went to N'Keal and was like, how did you deal with it? What do I do? So for him to humble himself and to feel comfortable enough to do that, and N'Keal said, you know your game, just do that, block everything out. And that's what he took into 2019. And it really spoke volumes, because you saw on the field, he just left it on the field. And then he did tell Brad Denny on Brad Denny's Speak of the Devils podcast that when he got to ASU, he was walking on campus and he just broke down crying, just so happy and so thankful, because he did go through a lot. He's from Reno. He went through a lot, then going to junior college. His parents paid for his way at junior college, and he never wanted to waste that. And so now to get Division I, one step closer to his dream of always being in the NFL, it came full circle. He just cried on campus at ASU. And again, that speaks volumes to who he is at his core, that he's not going to take this for granted. He's hardworking. He's gritty. I mean, you can see it on the field. So altogether, great head on his shoulders, great football IQ too.
That's so interesting, because a lot of times when you think of the greatest wide receivers in the world or of all time, they have a particular personality. They're known as divas. They're always open, or that's what they believe, and they come back to the huddle and they say, "Why don't you throw me the ball?" It sounds like what you're telling me is he's the anti-diva. He has the ability to be a great receiver, but he doesn't have that type of typical me attitude, which is refreshing.
100%. And you can relate to him. You can relate to the grittiness and that he had to overcome junior college and he never gave up. Then to Division One. And he's honest. His dream was always the NFL. And now he's doing it. And that's something his dad said when he was in college. Hey, you got here, but you have one more step to do. So it sounds like his parents are also super supportive, which also goes into why he is so fantastic.
Yeah, you know, there's two kind of people in NFL locker room. There's the kind of guy like Nick Bosa, who's been identified at probably 9 years old as a future first-round pick. And then there's the guys like Brandon Aiyuk, who had no outside forces pushing him along the way. He's pretty much single-handedly willed himself through high school, junior college, D1 to the NFL, and those are my favorite stories.